I had somebody write in on my video about the planter versus the drill, and they asked about, all right, so this is the planter to start with. What about a combine? Man, what a question. That is a great question. And so we're going to dive into that today. That's kind of the stuff I want to break down. I even got my handy dandy whiteboard here, so I'm going to be John Madden in it. It's been a while since I've got to pull a John Madden on you guys, but I got it because I'm a visual guy. I like to see some stuff. Maybe you can read it. I tried to write really big, but I'm going to break some things down for y'all on what you're going to be looking at, what to expect, and all those things. So before we jump into that, hit that like button, hit subscribe, share this with your friends, and comment below if there's something you would like for me to cover, some videos you'd like to see. Guys, I'm doing this for you guys, trying to help you out. I mean, I have fun doing it. Don't take me wrong. I do it for me, but I'm also doing it for you. So the combine, there's kind of this age-old question of which is the most important piece of equipment on the farm. And you got your guys that will argue that it's the planter. You got your guys that will argue that it's the sprayer. And you got your camp that will argue that it is the combine. Now, I don't know. I kind of fall in the camp of the planter. Like, I feel like it all starts with a great stand, and that's going to be from your planter, doing a good job putting it in the ground, all that. So I tend to err on the side of the planter, but I also understand that the sprayer is very pivotal because if you lose the crops to vegetation, you ain't gonna have a crop to harvest. So you gotta spray, you gotta do those things, and the combine. If you don't get the crops out of there, then there ain't no good to you either. So they all have their strengths and their weaknesses, or their pros and cons, whatever, in the argument. Again, I kind of fall in the planter camp, but a combine is a very important piece of equipment. Okay, where do you begin? Now, I'm going to tell you what I did. I got very fortunate in the aspect that I happened to find a farmer that was getting out. He had actually already given up his land that he was renting. He rented most all his acres, and he had let another farmer take it over. And he still had his combine. He still had a bean header. Now, it was a 9760 John Deere with a 625 header. I still got my cough, so bear with me. But I went and checked it out. I think at the time I was working around, I want to say around 300 acres. And, I was kind of getting to the place where I had been using my dad's combine, and that was fine when I was working 100 and something acres, but I was up to about 300 acres, and still wasn't a huge deal, but I was ready to have my own combine. I think at the time I had a service truck, and I might have had my planter. I don't remember if I had the planter yet or not. I think I had the planter, because actually I bought it before the combine, so I did have the planter as well, but I was ready to go for a combine. And I went and looked, this 9760, great combine. I mean, just a great combine, and probably more horsepower than a lot of guys start out with. But I was fortunate. This combine, now, it had a lot of hours on it. And that's one thing I'm going to add. For you guys starting out, especially with the cost of equipment, what it is today, you're probably going to have to look on the high hour side. Which means you're going to have to be ready to work on stuff, because it's going to tear up. But I bought this combine. The guy wanted $50,000 for the combine and the header. He included both of them in there. The header was pretty much wore slap out, but it did what I needed it to do. And it was a 25-foot header. 9760 had way more than enough power to handle that. So I was able to walk the dog with that header. I did have to end up buying a corn header, which I still use the same corn header. I have since upgraded headers. As far as on my bean side, I'm running a MacDon now, but I did not include headers in this conversation. I guess that can be one we can do on the next series, but you're going to want to start out probably with an auger style. It's just cheaper, save some money. But I got this wrote down here. I want to run you down what I'm looking at here. Now, and I did 3 different size operations. I got a 150 acre, a 300 acre, and a 700 acre. I'm taking this as you're kind of starting out. If you're bigger than this, that's great. It still applies. If you're smaller than this, that's great. It still applies. Figure this out. $50,000. That's kind of the price range I'm putting on it because that's what I started with. 50 grand for a combine. And then what is that? I did a 5-year loan on this. And that's assuming right now, I think that was 7% interest or so because interest rates are pretty crappy. So I did $50,000 over 5 years at like 7% interest. Your note is going to be almost exactly $12,000 a year on that. That's with no money down if you finance it all. So you're looking at around $12,000 a year right here. 150 acres. What I would do is kind of figure up how much money do you make? What are you making? What are you projecting to make? Myself personally, I like to shoot on the lower side of the average because try to plan for things to not be as great. I hope that they exceed my expectations. So I just set a 45 bushel average across the board. And this is going to be all soybeans just to keep things simple. If you have 45 bushel average, and I'm saying the average price is $12, I would figure on the lower side. Just again, I want it to surpass these right here. But this is what I would plan for, essentially. Budget for, I guess would be the better word. So on 150 acres, you're bringing in $81,000. 300 acres, that's $162,000. 700 acres, that's $378,000. This is not minus inputs or rent. So you got to take all these things into consideration. And it kind of shows you why I would honestly say if you're working 150 acres, I'd probably custom hire my combine work. Unless you can just find some hell of a deal, like a $20,000 combine that isn't just an absolute turd. And I'm going to get into kind of the different models that I would look at. I want to give you the rundown of this finance stuff. So on this 150 acres, let's say your soybeans, let's just say you got $200 an acre in them. Now I'm kind of hoping that's a little bit on the high side. But let's just say $200 an acre inputs, that's $30,000. So you got 81 grand here. So minus that, so you're left with $51,000. Now, let's do rent. Let's say rent's $125 an acre. Might be way more than that, might be a little less in your area, whatever. So that comes out to $18,750. So now minus the 51, that leaves you with $32,250. Now your combine note is 12 grand a year. 12,000, you're down to $20,250 left. Now on these inputs, I'm not including fuel costs, not including repairs, things like that. So you see you could chip away at these things really fast. And 20,000, now if you're working 150 acres, I'm assuming that you probably also have a job. Like this is not your income reliance. If that's the case, then as long as you're breaking even or going into the positive, then keep on trucking because you're growing. At 150, you're most likely growing. Like this is kind of, if you're staying at 150, then it's just your hobby. It's something you want to do on the side. That's fine. But I'm assuming, I'm going to take this that you're planning to grow. Let's skip the 300. Let's go to 700 acres. Y'all see what I did, how I figured this up. Again, that's 45 bushel beans per acre at $12. $12 is not going to be far off from where we're most likely going to see. I just actually finished up in a meeting with marketers, and yeah, bean prices are going to be down. Corn prices are going to be down. We're going to be looking around that $12 range. But on a 700 acre farm operation, $200 an acre, that's $140,000. Now you got $378,000 is your total income minus $140,000. That's $238,000. You know, you can factor the rest of the stuff in there. You could make that work. Now, if you're working 700 acres, you most likely are going to have a tractor payment. I don't know if you guys can see it. There you go. You're most likely going to have a tractor payment and probably a planter payment, other things. So all that to say, you got to sit down and figure this out. it's hard to place a number. And I'll be honest, even at 50,000, it's kind of hard to, it's hard to find a combine in that range. I was actually just looking earlier online just to see what I could find in the 50,000 range, and it was pretty limited. You kind of fall into this weird space. They're either like in the 90s or they're in like the 20s and 30s. The problem with that is the 90s, some of those are great combines, but they're $90,000, and you just don't have the budget space for a $90,000 combine. The other problem is you get down to $20,000-$30,000 combines and they're pieces of crap. They're just wore out and might have been abused. You're going to buy a $20,000 combine, you're probably going to spend $20,000 in repairs on it. And that's where there is a give and a take. You know, you cross a line of diminishing return where, yeah, I could find a combine for $25,000, but it's going to break down. It's not going to have the horsepower. Like I'm gonna cut beans at 2 miles an hour, and you know, if you work 150 acres, it is what it is. It's whatever. But again, I'm looking at this from the mindset of I'm trying to grow. I want to farm more. I'm not trying to stay at 150 acres. I want to grow and work more acres. This is something I want to do full time. Is what I'm looking at, because that was me when I started out. 9760. That was a very growable combine, meaning it could handle a 30-foot header. It could handle an 8-row corn header. It had the power stuff to handle all that. I had growing room with this combine, and then I ended up trading it. My dad traded in his 9770. I traded for that combine, and then a couple years later I ended up trading for my 680, which I have now, and I plan to run that combine for several years, barring any disastrous breakdown or something. So I'm looking at this from my perspective of I wanted to be a full-time farmer. I wanted to make my money off of my operation. That's where I'm at now. That's where I'm thinking you're wanting to be. So if you're at 150 acres, don't go buy a $20,000 piece of crap combine. You have no room to grow. Your combine is going to be war slap out. A 9650, a 9760, a 9770. That's the models I would tend to look for. Now, the 9770, it might still fall into that higher price range. I'm not real sure what you could find them for. A 9760, you might can find it because that's going to be early 2000s. They're going to have a good bit of age on them, and they're going to have a lot of hours on them. A 9650 is getting really old. It's probably going to have a lot of hours on it. The biggest thing you look at is your separator hours. Your engine hours don't matter quite as much, but I wouldn't really recommend going any smaller than that, because you want to be able to grow. If somebody comes to you and says, man, I've got 300 acres over here that I want to cut loose, I'd like for you to work them, and you got some like 9500 or whatever, some old wore out John Deere, you're going to have to be scrambling to get a new combine. And the bad thing is you ain't going to get jack crap for your other combine because it's old and nobody wants it. I mean, a 9650, I feel like you could probably find pretty reasonably, because you don't see a lot of people cranking them things out anymore. Most guys there's still some 9770s. A lot of guys now are at least running 670s to 680s. And I mean, obviously you got your 780s and all those that are out now. Now, as far as a red model, we ran a 1688 and a 2388 before we got our John Deere. I would probably urge you towards a 2388, again, from that growing standpoint. I don't know if growability, I don't know if that's a word, but it sounds fitting for what I'm trying to say, so I'm just going to use it. So from a growability standpoint, I don't think that I would recommend a 1688. I think I'd go for that 23, get some extra horsepower, a little bigger machine, and you could handle a little more load. Any of these machines, you got to be ready to work on them. My 9760 was a relatively trouble-free combine. The first year I ran that thing, really had no issues. The second year had some bearings go down, had to replace bearings, and then I had some issue out of like this solenoid block, and it went beyond my head, and John Deere had to come out and work on it. That ended up costing me a pretty good chunk of change, and I mean, and I have friends that farm with old stuff, and we joke around that they actually spend more in repairs every year than the machine itself is worth. The bigger and better equipment, one of the biggest benefits to that is your efficiency tends to increase. I mean, my 680, you're not going to go out and buy a 680, but my 680, I can cut beans 5 and 6 miles an hour. And you got a 9600 or something, some old combine, you're going to cut beans 2.5 miles an hour. So that's not going to be a game changer when you work 150 or 300 acres, or really even 700 acres. But you get up over 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 acres, whatever, that makes a big difference. 50 grand's the price range I would tell you to look for. And most places, I feel like are going to do a 5-year loan on that. Some of them might only want to do a 3-year loan depending on the age of the machine. But you're probably not going to find anybody that'll go 7 years. Sometimes they'll go 7 years on a pretty new piece of equipment. None of these combines will fall in that category. And something to consider. You're not going to get this with Farm Credit or any of your John Deere dealers or anything like that. But if you got a good relationship with your local bank, there is a thing where you basically just do a bridge loan and you can just keep re-upping it. It's a 1-year loan, and you'll have a set interest rate and your amount. And at the end of the year, you pay however much you want to pay as long as you pay the interest. Interest might be a little bit higher on it, but the nice thing is, if you have a terrible year, you just got to pay that interest. You obviously don't want to only ever pay the interest, because you will literally never pay this machine off. It's another option to consider with a combine. Think about a bridge loan through your bank. But again, 50 grand, that's the price I'd look at. If you're working 300 acres, you could probably make it pencil out. 150, but you're not dependent on the money from the farm, you might can make it pencil out. But it's going to be tight, and it's going to depend on what your bank or your lender is going to be willing to do for you. But a 9650, a 9760, and a 9770 would be my 3 recommendations, or a 2388 case would be my red recommendation. I cannot tell you any other models because I know very little about the red machines. I remember we had a 1688, I believe, that we literally had to work on every single day. I hated that combine with a burning passion. Scour the internet. Also something to consider. Do not be afraid to look kind of elsewhere, because you can get stuff shipped. Now, it might cost you $2,000 to have the combine shipped to you, but people will ship pretty much anything. The combine might even be a little pricier than that because it's so huge. But don't be scared to get on tractorhouse.com, look around, look up these models, and see what you can find. A couple things to look out for. Rice. I never have wanted a combine that has harvested rice. Rice is extremely abrasive. It wears a lot of the internals out on a combine, can wear the throat out, can wear your augers and stuff out. Like I never wanted a machine with rice that had been harvesting rice. So I would encourage you, avoid a machine from rice country and find out if it has harvested rice. The other, you need to check out the throat up in the feeder house. That pan can get wore out in there. Inspect that. You're going to have to replace bearings. Inevitably, you will have bearings go down on an older machine. It just comes with the territory. I can't tell you like where to look. You'll see them. The shaker arms on the back, those are a real butthole to repair, but they will inevitably go down on you. I'm a fan of duals on the front rather than the big super singles. I had super singles on my 9760 and it rode like a bucking bull. For your first combine, the tires are probably a little less something I would worry about as much as just how does the machine seem. Crank it up. Does it seem to run good? Does it shift good? I would drive it around, see if you feel any grinding or vibrating in the gears. If you're pulling in reverse, do you feel any grinding in the actual transmission? Go forward, feel any grinding. If it all feels smooth, you check for hydraulic leaks. A machine can be old and still be tight. And my 9760 was very much that way. It was an old machine, but it was a tight machine. And it had a lot of hours on it, but it had been taken well care of. and kept in the shed. You know, preferably try to find one that's in the shed. Mice are going to be probably part of your enemy. The 9760 I bought had basically an entire bag of mothballs in the cab, so you could barely stay in the cab from the smell of the mothballs. But yeah, guys, that is the biggest thing. And I always also like to four-wheel drive. You can find two-wheel drive combines. They'll be a good bit cheaper. I've never had a two-wheel drive combine, and I will never have a two-wheel drive combine. My 9760, my 9770, and my 680 all four-wheel drive, and I would encourage you to try to get a four-wheel drive. Sometimes during harvest, the beans dry out. Maybe it's been raining a bunch. Maybe you do tillage. I don't, but maybe you do some tillage. Your bottom is gone in the ground, but the beans are dry enough to cut. There's a rainstorm coming. You got to get in there. You can't wait. You're going to be happy you have four-wheel drive. A combine, if you know how to work on them, there's a lot of moving parts, but generally speaking, it's a bearing that's going to be your enemy on these older machines. And they are replaceable. Some of them are really hard to get in and out of there, but be prepared for bearings. And if you get an older machine, grease the hell out of it. That's the biggest thing. You're going to want something that you can grow with. And I'll do another video on headers. We'll get into that. That'll be, you know, tag along with this one, but we'll go into the discussion of headers and what routes you need to go in. But guys, that again, just to run this down, $50,000 combine, you're looking at about $12,000 a year. That's at 7% interest. You might can get that somebody might can beat that. 7% interest, 5 years. And again, your income, that's how you need to do it. Just figure out your projected yields at, and I'd say $12 a bushel for beans. Don't go into it saying, well, I'm going to book all my beans at $13 and they're going to average my high bean. I'm going to shoot for 58 bushel per acre. That is great. I hope you get that. I hope you get $13 a bushel. Do not build your budget on a best case scenario. Typically, I build my standard budget on a nominal year, just average. And I also, a lot of times, will even figure up a low yield, like a bad year, and then I might just for fun figure up a really good year. Those are really fun to figure up, but they also can lead to quite a bit of disappointment. So, and hey, guys, if y'all would like to see how I build a budget, let me know. Let me know below whatever topic you'd like for me to cover next. If you have any questions about combines, anything you need to look for in particular, do not hesitate to reach out. I'm here to help out. I'll gladly try to guide you with whatever I can. And like I said, guys, just comment below, anything. Hope that helped you out, gave you a little bit, gave you some models to look at. Again, 9650, 9760, 9770, all three machines that I would put my stamp of approval on. Even the 2388 International, I would put my stamp of approval on that one as well. I cannot speak for any other machines. I never ran any cloths, never ran any gleaners, anything like that. But guys, please don't hesitate to reach out. Good luck. If you're looking for a combine, scour the web. Try to find you an old farmer that's maybe retiring, got an old machine, throw you in a header, make a deal with him, kill two birds with one stone. Guys, hit that like button, hit subscribe. We'll catch you next time.